Greetings and welcome to Remedy Radio, the show that communicates solutions, helping you find, learn, and eventually teach remedies for life, love, liberty, and the achievement of both happiness and satisfaction for you and your loved ones. Removing your uncertainty and inspiring your curiosity.
Remedy Radio, Episode 3, is entitled Education, Learning Our Way to Peace and Freedom. Welcome, folks, to Remedy Radio. I'm your host, Adam Dodds, with my astute associates Paul Verge and Robert Christie today. I was looking over the show outline today, and I've just been blown away. So hopefully we'll be able to touch on all the topics that we've got written down. Paul's taken a lot of time and a lot of research. Rob has also been dedicating a lot of time here, putting in a lot of effort, trying to bring the most useful information that affects everyone. So this is about touching on important information. And today's episode is about education. So how does education affect us all would be one question. And another question would be where to start on the topic of education, right? Yeah. So, I don't know. Paul?
Well, somebody could start with the purpose of education is to teach us, useful skills in order to navigate reality, in order to function in the reality that we all exist in together, to, learn about society and how to communicate and how to measure things. And essentially, without an education, you would kind of be like a caveman coming into a society, not understanding the kind of rules and behaviors and expectations and such. So education, in a sense, is meant to put everyone into a more common ground of understanding, ostensibly. So that can be a good or a bad thing, depending on if the rules that your society is governed by are life-affirming or not, right? So our education system is supposed to be a place right now where we learn to read, we learn to write, we learn math, and we learn some version of history and the sciences, how things work. And whether it's all accurate, we don't know, because we're just being kind of taught what's in some books that some people wrote that may or may not have the expertise that is claimed. But it can be argued that literacy is a form of slavery when the reader doesn't have any systematic methodology of critical thinking to use to discern fact from fiction. And so in that sense, if our education is like one way, then, and we don't have the ability to question the veracity of the facts that we're being fed, then in that sense, we can be taken advantage of, and education can become a control scheme rather than a scheme of liberation or setting us free.
Keeping people in line, so to speak.
So what you're saying is that essentially education could be used to create a specific kind of reality for a specific group of people for their own means?
Absolutely. If somebody's trying to shape your perceptions or to mold what is correct for you in your reality, then a systemized outcome-based education wherein information's fed in and then expected to be regurgitated and done enough times where that set of rules or that set of facts are accepted as the reality, the facts. And most times that would be a rigid set of facts that you don't go against or continue to question further. You just accept them at that point.
That's without question, right?
Would that be something like taxes?
Taxes, for example. I in grade 10, I was taught about income tax and how to file my taxes, and I was 14 years old, right? And so when I started working that summer, they impressed upon me this gleeful zeal that you're like an adult now. If you're paying taxes, you're contributing to society. And I had no idea where my money was going. Mm-hmm. Like no clue whatsoever. I just was like, I was contributing to this entity called society. And whoever ruled society was the people that were best qualified to be there, or else they wouldn't be there. Right?
What's that old saying? There are two things sure in life, death and taxes.
Exactly.
Yeah. And all that means is taxes is somebody taking away your energy to be redistributed somewhere else. My real education would reveal where that money actually goes, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah. Today we're mostly talking about education and what it means, right? So
Yeah.
how does it affect everyone, you know?
Absolutely. So I think in modern education, it's not so much that what we're taught is incorrect. We're taught a lot of very useful skills and very useful things, not necessarily within context or with the application to things that we'd necessarily be passionate about. I think the education system's more there to force feed these things to you in a bland and kind of homogenous manner, so that learning and curiosity and creativity become more like drains or more like negative associated perspectives, so that you are so worn down by the learning process that you can't wait to go home and not learn anything. You can't wait to go home and not be creative, i.e. watch TV, play video games, do all these other things that are waiting for you to distract you. And so in that way, the education system removes the likelihood of people becoming an artist. Because if you're not feeling creative, if you're not feeling curious, you're not going to go out of your way to look at things and learn new things and then turn around and express those things through your art.
Yeah.
And then what that does is creates a dearth of artists, and thus artists becoming a rarity. They become more celebrated in culture because people are like, wow, I don't have any creativity of my own, but I can look up to this one creative person who I can quote unquote worship as a celebrity.
Yeah.
Again, a whole other topic, but
Education and art don't necessarily go together.
Well, unless I fully don't understand the definition of education, it seems like it would almost be it's more of an indoctrination system now, more than an education system.
Absolutely. And it's indoctrinating you with those same facts, and like I said, they're useful things, but it's not so much what they teach you, it's what they don't teach you, what they hide or what they occult. It's the lie of omission. If we're only getting told half of true history in school, we're getting the half that was written by the people who won the war and then became the foundations that wrote all the textbooks. And this is something that's covered in the Reese Committee with Norman Dodd and Charlotte Iserbyt, but that's something we'll get into later in the show. What you effectively find is that there was a campaign to standardize schools to strip down or water down the useful aspects like deductive reasoning, critical thinking, philosophies, understanding fallacious logic, and teaching the Trivium and Quadrivium in their proper order. And in favor of dismantling or taking those things out, the public was left intellectually self-defenseless against these new emerging forms of media and advertising and political rhetoric and forms of mind control, increasing forms of mind control. And so now we're about 90 years into this kind of experiment where we've got a dumbed down public who thinks they're smarter than ever because the education system is self-reinforcing in terms of its veracity, right? It constantly tells you that it's the necessary thing, but it's broken, and we're always complaining about how it needs to be fixed, and yet we go and enforce it on everyone with like mafia-like zeal. Mm-hmm. And so because it's broken, the next generation it keeps imprinting ends up being dumber, quote unquote, dumber than the last.
So the tests become easier and easier, right?
Yeah, they just moved the bar down. So it went from being 90% was an A to 80% was an A to 70% an A, and now it's like if you get above 50%, everyone gets an A. And now if you just write the test, you get an A for effort, and that's all you really need. And so it's gone from, like, I believe in competency, right? Yeah. Testing people's competency, but grading them like a piece of beef, to me, goes against the idea of teaching someone. There's this idea of the single room schoolhouse where you would have a whole bunch of range of kids in age, right? Maybe 15, 20 kids in this single room schoolhouse, and they would be from the kindergarten to the teenage age. And the point was that they would go through the entire lessons over several months of all the grades, right? And the younger kids might not get it at first, so they would go play. The middle kids would kind of be struggling with the concept, and the older kids would be learning. But then when it came to the middle type learning, the older kids would become the teachers and teach the younger kids, here's how you do it. And then those kids would then teach the younger kids. And so every student, as they were moving up the scale, was constantly learning from the older kids and teaching the younger kids.
Right.
And so by the time you got to the 12th grade, you had already learned the first 11 and taught the first 11 grades. So you knew the stuff inside out.
Yeah.
And it was reinforcing, and it was teaching you interpersonal skills, and it was reinforcing these concepts, the trivium and the quadrivium. And so in that way, we always think of an adult has to be in charge of teaching the children, right? Like either a teacher or an authority structure, or a parent in homeschooling, when it's like, no, get 3 kids together and have one of them like understand how to teach, and you will have a school right there.
Right. Well, and I'm sure you guys, in your own experience in the last 10 years or whatever, doing a lot of this work and learning all the things you've learned, the easiest thing for myself, especially when I learn something new, the easiest way for me to sort of ingrain it in myself is then go tell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so I know I've driven everybody nuts for the last 10 years passing on stuff because I learned something, so I got to go tell somebody so that I can sort of put it in my own memory.
Yeah.
And it's not always right or correct or whatever, but it's sort of the process of,
It's like practice.
yeah, so
Yeah,
That's cool.
digestion of information, so to speak. That's why we take short breaks. And on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to continue on the topic of education and how it affects you and how you can understand a little bit more of it. So stick with us. We'll be back. Thanks, guys, for sticking around. Welcome back to Remedy Radio. Paul Verge and Rob Christie and I are discussing a little bit about remedy and education, and so we've left off talking a little bit about education and some of the important topics that come with education, and that's knowing a little bit about where it comes from. So Rob, do you want to quote off what you were talking about on break there? You had a little quote there you wanted to talk about, so we'll get it on here, Remedy Radio.
should we set it up?
Yeah.
Well, Paul, you
Yeah.
want to set it up?
Well, Bertrand Russell was a social engineer who had some very kind of harsher opinions on how education could be used to control the masses. So this is one of the quotes.
Education should aim at destroying free will, so that after pupils have left school, they shall be incapable throughout the rest of their lives of thinking or acting otherwise than as their schoolmasters would have wished.
So that's in essence talking about shaping the perspectives of the students so that they become instinctively obedient. And this would be useful if those students were then to be used in the military, which is a strictly obedience and hierarchy-based control structure. Any corporate job where your boss tells you what to do and you have to do it without question, usually. Any university, again, where the professor, the lecturer is the authority in the room, although that's usually good professors encourage discussion and dissent. But effectively, it puts you in this 12-year conditioning scheme whereby you're so used to either being humiliated when you're singled out by the teacher, so that crushes your creative spirit or your curious spirit a little bit. Being graded or told that you're wrong on a number of times, which just often hurts people's feelings and discourages learning. Being forced to read books that aren't interesting while being denied access to books that are interesting, and the idea of provisional self-esteem, whereby you actually associate your emotions with these kind of arbitrary test scores, or worse, interpretations of your work or your creative expression as being graded, right? One painting is worth this many points, whereas this painting's not worth as many points.
And that's why art and education are at a constant, how do you grade art? And the reality is you can't.
Well, it seems to me that we're suggesting maybe that creativity is kind of frowned upon.
Yeah, the point is of grading
It just
art.
can't be acknowledged properly and graded properly.
Well, there's not much need for creativity in sort of in a battlefield.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Because
unless
they've got it all figured out already, and you just got to follow orders.
unless
And
there's
in a-
certain
in-
strategies you can use, right?
Right. But they don't really want to hear it. You're not going to run up to the commander and say, "Hey, Sarge, I got a better idea here." He's going to be like, "Yeah, get in line, Skippy." Right. And in a corporate job, I think that, especially like sort of the what education has conditioned people to be able to be is just sit there for 8 or 10 hours a day and really do nothing.
Assembly line type work.
Right.
And
So there's no creativity.
Yeah, it turns us into automatons, and what we're looking for is to become autonomous. And autonomous learners or autodidacts are people that, like they would go through the single-room schoolhouse, they would be able to self-teach and self-learn. They'd be able to recognize when there's information to be had, how to consider it objectively, how to identify things, how to understand and know the logic of things, and then most importantly, know how to communicate that knowledge and understanding through the wisdom of communication or persuasive rhetoric.
Right.
And that's kind of what the Trivium is all about. It's this aspect of learning that enables you just to function and navigate very basic reality effectively. So that
what is the Trivium again?
The Trivium in order is classical grammar, and then there's logic or dialectic, which is the understanding of things, and lastly there's the rhetoric or the communication, which is expressing the wisdom of a subject and how it works.
Reiterating.
Yeah, passing it on. So you might be a mechanic. You have to identify the parts of a car. Then you have to know the logic, which is identifying how those parts work together, and then teaching someone else how to fix the car would be the rhetoric, or showing someone else how to fix the car would be the rhetoric. And then once somebody's used those same 3 steps in response from you, then they will then have the skill to fix the car, to identify the parts, to explain how it works, and to teach someone else.
Right. So then essentially if you go and you approach any sort of topic and you have these set of tools, then you have a far greater chance than someone else who approaches the same topic who has no tools, right? And it's not to say that, it's to be in a better position, but it's basically to be able to absorb the information properly, right? So
yeah, the order of the methodology is very important, because we are taught these 7 liberal arts, the Trivium and Quadrivium, in school. We're taught a version of them. We're not taught the whole package of each, because each of the elements itself breaks down into several strategies and understandings and categories. Like logic has the fallacies, right? If you've never heard of the fallacies, you've probably used a few yourself. I know I have, such as the straw man, the red herring, 2 wrongs make a right. Yeah, ad hominem attacks you hear all the time, right? Anytime someone dismisses your argument as crazy without considering it, that's called an ad hominem attack or an appeal to ridicule.
Oh, that's stupid.
Exactly. So
like,
it's
okay.
they're what they are. A fallacy is effectively a shortcut past critical thinking, and so when somebody engages in it, you can call them out on it, and if they refuse to, correct the fallacy or explain themselves, then it means that their argument's essentially intellectually bankrupt.
But if you call them out on it, where it's not an offensive call out, it's more of a curious call out. Like, hey,
that sounds
just curious
like
as to why you would think that way. Just curious, not to challenge your position, but just curious as to maybe there's a different way that we can approach the situation, right? So it's all on how the delivery of the information, the intonation that you're using, right, will drastically affect who you're talking to, right? So
how you deliver it.
Does education teach that?
No, they teach you obedient rhetoric.
But those are basic communication skills that I think everyone should have, right? So that we can all come to an understanding together and say, okay, well, let's just use this in order to communicate with each other, right? Now and then work from that foundation. Right.
Well, it's because of the way we've been educated, and go back to the auto mechanic analogy, the way it's supposed to work is that the end of that thing, the one who's learning from the auto mechanic can then, he can then teach, right? So the way that it would work is that the student is then the teacher, right? Whereas the way it is now, it's, we don't have the ability to teach another.
Right.
Because the order's been mixed up, so we don't have the correct order. So we're not able to do that. We have to go to somebody, some sort of authority or somewhere, to get the information that we need, because we don't know how to actually get it. Right. We don't know how to learn.
So for the circle to be complete, there has to be a teaching aspect there.
Right.
There has to be a reiterating. That's why, like you said, it sinks in more when you tell somebody else, right? Whatever it is that you're experiencing or have been, exposed to, for example, right? Like this kind of stuff that I've been exposed to in terms of education, and this has just been blowing my mind, this whole experience of Remedy Radio, all the information and all the outlines of all the shows that we've been doing is just, it's really a lot to take in, and once you start digesting all that information, different people have different ways of digesting it, right? So sometimes you can be sort of like in the middle of a pool in the deep end, worrying if you got your breath, and then somebody's there and saying, yeah, it's okay, I've been through that kind of stuff before, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think that's what I've been able to be around a really strong network of people like Paul and like Rob, to be able to help digest the information. So we hope that with Remedy Radio, we can be able to sort of bring information to light and share stuff like education, right? So
yeah, well, information is part of the solutions, right? If you're not aware of what the real problems are, it's kind of hard to find workable solutions.
Right.
So awareness is half the solutions right up front. Then once you've got adequate awareness, the actual real solutions, actually, it turns out, are either commonsensical or were hidden right in front of us the whole time.
Basics.
It's just a matter of getting enough people to recognize the actual problems, to refocus the energy back on the viable solutions, which are, again, they're right in front of us. It's not rocket science. It's literally quite simple, a lot of these solutions, to get off the dependency. And I think, again, that's what education reinforces, is the deferment of thinking to an authority. Mm-hmm. It essentially says you are not an authority over your own life. You are not responsible enough for self-ownership. And if that's reinforced into you for 12 years, you'll actually begin to believe that. When you own yourself, like Rob owns himself, I own myself, and Adam owns himself.
That's the way it works.
Because we recognize we have common interests and common needs, we come together, because we also make each other laugh, but we come together to fulfill those needs together, right? He'll make me a green smoothie, I'll try and show him how to edit, and Rob will come in and he just adds the magical vibe to every place that he goes. And we're all fulfilling a need for each other constantly. And so the process of education should be really how to fulfill your own needs. And that's what the Trivium and the Quadrivium provide, the tools for achieving and finding and learning to fulfill your own needs.
And one of our key needs is fulfilling others' needs.
Totally.
Exactly.
And the need to express ourselves. See, that's, if you can't properly express yourself and have somebody else to receive that information, then it's hard to be able to live a complete life. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to touch again on some pretty interesting stuff about education and how it affects you and how we can move forward from there. So stick with us. Thanks for sticking with us, folks. Back at Remedy Radio, Paul Verge, Robert Christie, myself, Adam Dodds, talking about education and why it's important to understand a little bit about education. So we left off talking about,
well, just in general, the control scheme, the point of dumbing us down, really. I think it's important that we consider the fact that 12 hours of schooling equates to about 15,000 hours, give or take a couple years for post-secondary or repeating a grade or two, but roughly 15,000 hours of public education that you'll endure before you're free to go on into your adult life. And that's a lot. That's a lot of time to take in information. And you have to wonder, is there a better, more efficient way? Like, I can consider myself having done thousands of hours of research on geopolitics, the currency systems, law and commerce, false flag terrorism, health, food, words, like all these different subject matter that I find interesting myself. And would I say I've devoted 15,000 hours to it? I'm not sure. I couldn't say that I've given that heavy of a commitment. But that amount of time is needed to essentially break you. I remember that when I went to school, I loved it at the beginning. The more my teachers challenged me, the more I enjoyed it. The less they challenged me, the more boring I thought it was.
Yeah.
And other than a few years of social adjustment, which I found difficult, which was adjusting to people's egos and standards and expectations, and the kind of shallowness that was being bred as kind of narcissistic social structures. I still found the process of being in class and the assignments and the creative work, I found that stimulating. But towards the end, it got more and more boring and more soul draining, to the point where I felt like not even showing up. I felt like like school was pointless, like that it wasn't teaching me anything at this point that I didn't know. It was just teaching me more complicated versions of stuff that it wanted me to believe, but that I could find no rational application for in life, like calculus, right? So I just didn't care anymore, and I barely graduated. You know what I mean? And the scholarships that I had earned in the previous years, I did nothing with. I decided not to go to university. I decided I didn't want anything more to do with the schooling system whatsoever. And, you know, my mother and my grandmother, both wonderful women, are both teachers, a preschool teacher and a elementary school teacher. And so I understand and value the contributions that teachers make. You know, it's one of the hardest jobs in the world, trying to get all these different personalities in line and then simultaneously imprint them with knowledge, and then hope that they not only will take the process in, but also enjoy it and be active participants, notwithstanding all their own problems at home and the social structure within class. It's a hard job. And my mom does an amazing job working with her kids. My grandma still gets stopped on the street for people who recognize her from the impact that she had on them as preschoolers, all the way to the next generation of people who put their kids in her preschool class and the impact that they have. And so I see how important a teacher can be in shaping a child's life. And now instead we take that for granted and we crap all over teachers' heads and say they're not doing a good enough job. And we're not looking at the system itself and how the system's essentially sabotaging a teacher's ability to educate our children.
Well, I think teachers don't even realize that they're not properly teaching, and I don't want to say this in a very general perspective. Like, I want to say this specific to public education system, right? Where my mom was a part of the education system as a teacher as well. And when I talk to her about this kind of stuff, it's sort of, she understands it, but now that she's retired, right? It's like, wow, I never really realized that this is what I was a part of, right? And so, you know, in most cases, it's duped a lot of people, right? Sometimes, you know, the people who are protecting it, right? Like the whole, you know, what is it in the Matrix when they say, you know, they'll protect the system, so to speak, right?
The people who are dependent.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, they don't even know, right? It's the whole education, right? People have been educated, and we honor education like we honor war. And we don't really understand what it means. We don't understand what war really is and who we're fighting for and what the implications are. You know, it's all for freedom.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break, sorry to cut you off. And when we come back, we're going to talk some more about the education system and how it affects everyone. Thanks for sticking with us, guys. Thanks again for joining us on Remedy Radio. I'm your host, Adam, and I've got Rob and Paul here with us today talking about education and the sort of touching on personal historical events that happened to us. Our mom's family being part of the education system, so understanding the value of education, but also the value that there is remedy to the education system in terms of being able to provide and point kids in the right direction in terms of websites. There's a lot of tools available. Absolutely.
You're essentially the uphill battle is against all the distractions and the conditioning that's already existing. Mm-hmm. that kids will want to go do anything else but learn because there's so many quote unquote fun distractions to be had, right, from TV and video games and all this stuff. And so it's trying to teach them positive habits, constructive habits that will stimulate their curiosity. Like, the best thing you can do is teach your kid to be interested in some form of artistic expression, whether it's sculpting or painting or music or something where it involves you activating that side of the brain.
A passion. There has to be a passion there, right?
Well, you can't force your kid to have a passion, but you can try and inspire a passion by showing them a bunch of different stuff and seeing which one makes your kid's eyes light up.
For sure.
Well, inspire a passion in yourself.
Absolutely.
Show your kid that you have a passion. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I think that one of the biggest things that we need to do is get over our own delusion, right? Like, one of the things that I was trying to mention about the whole thing about, like, we put education on a pedestal, and it's really our own delusion. We're deluded into thinking that we're so smart, and that because we have all these things, and we're doctors and we're lawyers and we've done all this education, and we're so smart that we know everything. And we really need to wake up from our own delusion first, that we are so smart, or that we think we are, that we have all this information, because we talk about how much information there actually is out there, but how much of that information is really useful. I know my brain is full of a ton of information. Lots of it's useless, like all the 80s music and all the TV I used to watch back then that's taken up tons of space that I'd really like to be able to clean out of there. But like if like we've said this many times before, if the lights get turned off, the power goes off and the water shuts off, like most of us in the city, we just turn into blobs and we die because we don't have a clue on how to actually survive.
Joe, it's like that joke Joe Rogan said, if I left you alone in the woods with a hatchet, how long would it take before you'd be able to send me an email? And it's because we don't know how anything works. We don't know really how to build anything. We just know how to buy stuff off smart people. Yeah. And so, again, this getting back to becoming an autodidact, becoming an autonomous self-teaching learner, if you have those skills, those tools to be able to do that, you'll face any new subject, any new skill that you want to learn with confidence, because you know an ordered methodology with which to approach it, to logically integrate it into your habit and skill set.
And it doesn't happen overnight.
No,
and it's like we're not beacons of wisdom. We're learning the whole process ourselves, like Paul mentioned before in some shows, right? So it's like it is to a certain degree a learning experience for all of us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, life's a learning experience. So you just have to...
If you're not learning, you're probably dead.
Well, if you're not learning, you're not really living.
Yeah.
You're just going through some repetitive motions, or you're probably doing some actions that somebody else pre-suggested into your head, right? Learning is about going out and exploring and looking for new adventures and new experiences and new perspectives, and you don't have to agree with them all. You don't even have to enjoy or appreciate them all, but to know that they're out there so that you can actually weigh those things against everything else that you have in your life. It gives you perspective. It gives you clarity to accurately measure and judge instead of hastily reacting in judgment before you've thought something through. There's a quote that says, what is it? The space, where is it?
Stimulus and response, that one?
Yeah, there's a space between the initial thought. Okay, between stimulus and response, there's a space, and in that space resides our choice. So just between when something starts to affect you and how you react or respond to it, that's the only place there's any real choice in life. Everything else is the result of those actions. But as Adam said before, there is no such thing as choice. It's really just an illusion, because he is a beacon of wisdom. The fact is that choice really exists in those little half moments between where we choose how to react or respond to a situation. So, I stub my toe. I can either react by punching a wall. Now I've got to deal with a stubbed toe and a broken hole in the wall, or I can
fist.
Or I can intellectually respond and go, it's just pain. I just need to breathe out.
Yeah.
The pain is gone, and I reinforce that to myself. And before I know it, I forgot that I stubbed my toe, and I get on with my day.
And that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I had to learn that.
I'm not gonna put a hole in the wall next time I stub my toe.
We've all been there. That's the point. That's why these lessons are universal in the sense that everyone can understand them because they apply in almost every situation. This is almost like relearning the common basic rules, because what we were taught as the common basic rules in our public education system are just watered down versions.
Yeah.
It's like being given a rusty sword and being told to go into war.
And there's a great podcast out there that talks just about that, and Brett Venot has a podcast called School Sucks that I highly recommend. We were working on some masonry work on some ponds this summer.
Stone masonry.
And Rob and I were listening to the School Sucks podcast the whole day, and it was just like mind-blowing, the kind of information that's out there in regards to the education system, right? And we hope that this is just sort of the tip of the iceberg, that what you can sort of go in and follow that rabbit hole, so to speak, right? Just to get you curious, and that's what our hopes is today, is to touch base on some stuff that we feel is important. So
absolutely. So where else can we go with this conversation? Let's see. I think if people want to understand kind of a bit about the history of public education, like how it came to be this version that we had, maybe we can talk about the Prussian education system, and even going back as far as Plato and designing this idea of a public utopian, everyone on the same level. But we'll do that when we come back from this break.
Perfect.
You're watching and listening to Remedy Radio.
All right, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Remedy Radio. Adam, Paul, and Rob here trying to communicate solutions to everyone today, and hopefully being able to inspire your curiosity and get you to go through that rabbit hole just a little bit more. So
there's no trying involved, Adam.
There is no trying.
We're doing it,
you're
buddy.
right. That's so true. I catch myself using stuff like that all the time.
Everyone's always attempting, and we only measure our attempts by our successes for some reason. And I tend to think that we learn more from our failures than from our successes, because it's each time that we make a mistake, it really presents an opportunity to take that mistake, look at it, how did it happen? Okay, now I'll seal off those possibilities for next time, and now you've just made the possibility of repetition of that mistake a minimized risk. And so in that, again, that's the process of learning, is getting through life. You only try and burn yourself on a hot plate once before you realize it's hot. You only want to get in one car accident that's your fault before you realize I better drive responsibly.
Yeah, and then being able to tell somebody, hey, look, that plate there is really hot, so don't touch it.
Yeah, and again, none of us have any illusions that the best teacher isn't experience. It is. Experience will teach you 100% better than just trying to tell someone else. But the fact that we're equipped with the ability to share our experience verbally, or to paint a picture in somebody's mind with words, with symbols essentially, so that they can visualize and empathize with the feeling that we had when we took a regretful action, that's an amazing skill. Like, to be able to create this, take someone back in time to what just happened to us, explain what happened, explain why it happened, and now they're insulated from that possible thing happening to them just a little bit more.
Completing the circle.
And that, again, it's learning. Education, real education is learning. If it's just, here's some facts, you can read them, write them back on a thing, that's regurgitation. And regurgitation is not an education. So, we should bring up Erica Goldson, the valedictorian.
Very cool speech.
Yeah, for
check
those
it out on YouTube.
For those few people who are left on the internet who haven't seen it, if you type in Erica Goldson valedictorian on YouTube, you can see her brilliant speech, which she also has reiterated in public in different settings and stuff. And definitely someone who's on the ball in terms of understanding not just how the education system works to subvert critical thinking and creativity, but in terms of trying to get a deeper understanding of reality. I think we all salute you, Erica. So thanks for your work.
Absolutely.
And then getting into this whole idea of the Trivium and the Quadrivium, I think it's really important to point out, because these are, we're touting these as the modern super tools of education, right? And you've heard of the subjects, grammar and logic and rhetoric. You've heard of math and geometry and music and astronomy, and you're like, what's the big deal? I already know about all those things. I kind of understand how they work, so how are they the secrets of anything? Well, in masonry, for example, those 7 liberal arts are the top dog, the top dollar, the top knowledge that you get to learn in terms of how the cosmos interacts and how everything unlocks, because there's a deeper understanding to those 7 liberal arts. On the surface, if you don't know what order they go in or how they apply to things, you will look at them from a surface understanding. No big deal. If you're taught the deeper context, the deeper history, the deeper manifestation, like sacred geometry or vibrational dynamics, sympathetic vibrational dynamics, then you understand how music really works.
That's a rabbit hole.
Or you understand how geometry really works in terms of fractal geometry. If you understand how rhetoric works in terms of persuasive and deceptive rhetoric, or how logic works in terms of the fallacies, then you have a greater and deeper appreciation for why these 7 liberal arts need to be understood, and need to be understood on a deeper level because otherwise you're not really playing with the full operating manual. You don't have the proper, your compass is a little off. And then that's going to lead to frustration, regret, and conflict ultimately.
And I think that the Trivium and the Quadrivium is something that, as Rob mentioned before, is something that we're all born with. It's just something that's been taken away from us. So like we say, usually common sense is not always so common. And it's true, it isn't, and it's because it's been specifically designed to be taken away from us. So if we understand who we truly are, right, and we don't derive or deem from that, so to speak, right, then all this stuff that we're talking about, these basic, I guess you can call them truths, right, all seem to guide you in the right direction in life, and when you aim to reiterate these things to people that you care about, then they become supports for you, right? So it works in a cyclical motion like everything else in life, right? So Remedy Radio is just the aspect of that circle that helps to be able to share with you guys and empower people that have may or may not necessarily been exposed to this kind of stuff. So
yeah, that's why we're getting back to the basics, is to, if we're going to, in future episodes, we might dump some heavier information, or information that takes a little bit more intellectual weight to consider, or emotional weight to not emotionally react to what you might think is the harshness of a subject, and to consider some facts without judging them right away is the epitome of wisdom. But to judge a bunch of facts without considering them at all is the epitome of ignorance. I think that's how the saying goes. So we're just we don't want to tell anyone what to think at all. We don't want to tell them what they should believe or what set of facts are the truth. We just want to re-equip people with the tools to properly discern and navigate reality, establish what's fiction and nonfiction, and then we will naturally all gravitate towards the same leveled out area of knowledge once we've all got those same tools, because the truth is the truth. It's having the proper machete to hack through the branches to get through to the truth that we all need. And some of us have little razor blades, some of us are just grabbing at branches. We're all trying to get through the kind of the fog of untruth, the unreality that's been spawned around us.
The layers that have been put on top of us.
This
As
is
Brett
mega
Venot,
onion.
Brett Venot says it that glad, I think, the layers of
layers of lies or layers of untruth, but it's really it's unreality, because it's not based in reality. It's designed specifically to obscure reality, so that as you try and navigate through unreality, thinking it's reality, it's like swimming in. You think you're swimming in water, but you're swimming in Jello, and so it's like you're like, why is this Jello so hard to swim through? It should be water.
And the teacher's like, shut up, it's just water.
Exactly.
No, not all teachers. I shouldn't generalize like that.
But I think it's interesting. We were going to get into the history. If you look up the Prussian education system, or the history of Prussian education, and how that education system was developed in order to create a kind of a militaristic, obedient society, because the previous generations had been so educated that they resisted going to war. They resisted joining wars, and they resisted encouraging any wars of aggression against other nations. They were educated to understand that war, as Smedley Butler said, was a racket. And so as this education system was changed to a graded class-style system of outcome-based, where you regurgitated tests and had a limited version of critical thinking, then they were able to get a more obedient generation of the populace coming out, who, when put into the military, would now at least blindly march and do whatever. They might not still shoot their guns because they were so scared, but dehumanizing the enemy was a trick that they would learn in the next century or two. And so, based on that Prussian education system, where you had Kindergarten, right, which was the introduction to bridge reality to school, where it was still playtime and nap time and still fun, and then once you got to grade 1, which was the Volksschule, right, then that was the school for the common folks, the Volksschule. Then you would be introduced into this grading system where you took tests, and again they would start it off easy, but it would increase in difficulty. But the thing was that it was standardized, so no matter who the smartest and dumbest kid in the class was, the tests were all the same, and it would just be grading the kid essentially from quote unquote smartest to dumbest, which immediately creates this idea of provisional self-esteem.
Right.
Then the upper class kids, the private kids, would go to what was called the real school, which is the real school. It's not the watered down version. It was the giving the kids the trivium and quadrivium, giving them the proper skills of critical thinking and proper rhetoric, so that they would be the leaders in society. And so it was actually creating a different class system with, employees and consumers, or who would become consumers, and then the leaders and administrators and authorities going to two different schools.
Kind of sounds like officer school.
Well, this is what was then mirrored and exported to the rest of the world, especially North America. And that's what we continue to have today, is this ordered regiment, militaristic style school. And we have two classes. We still have private schools. We still have the Ivy League universities, where not only are they taught the watered down version in public school, but they're even taught kind of a watered down version in the private elite schools now, and it's only through joining these secret societies that you actually learn the significance of the trivium and quadrivium now, or if you become like a high-ranking lawyer or something. So they've protected it in more and more layers.
Do you think that they actually even know that it's the trivium, and they like?
Most people don't.
Yeah, I think it's like it's used more the higher up you get, but I still think they don't even have a clue of it, right? It's just used.
I don't think they by those names they might not call it, but they do. They're aware of the skills individually,
right?
And they know the value.
They're better trained in the skills, but they don't actually know, and they still can't put it all together. Because if they could put it all together, they would get themselves.
They're using it out of order essentially, because they themselves are taught out of order. But we'll talk more about the proper order of the trivium and quadrivium when we come back.
All right.
On Remedy Radio.
Remedy Radio, folks. All right, folks. Well, thank you, and thanks for sticking with us on Remedy Radio. We were going to get into a little bit of a heavier topic of the trivium and quadrivium. And Paul, if you can take us in to a little bit more detail about what the trivium and the quadrivium exactly mean, and how they can be applied to one who is trying to hack through those branches of deception.
Yeah, sure. Well, as we mentioned, the trivium is made up of, that's how you analyze language, essentially, in communication. It's grammar, which would be knowledge, the knowledge of identifying things, the dialectic, logic, the understanding, so logic or understanding of something, so how those individual things work together, and then lastly, the rhetoric or communication, which is sharing the wisdom. So being able to communicate those first two things. You have to think of it, if they're done out of order, if they're not done grammar, logic, rhetoric, then you're communicating first, then you don't have the knowledge and understanding, you're communicating is going to be, misinformation.
Skewed.
If you try and have understanding without knowing what you're talking about, or knowing how to talk about it, it's pretty useless to have that knowledge, or that understanding. And if you have knowledge of something, but you don't know how it works, and you don't know how to talk about it, again, pretty not as useful as if you did. So having that direct knowledge of those three steps in order, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, grammar, logic, rhetoric, that's the first step, just ingraining that into how you take in information via the five senses. And this is symbolized by the Pythagorean triangle, the 5, 3, 4. So you've got the 5, which represents the five senses, you've got the 4 and the 3. So the five senses taking information, the 3 in the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, analyze that information, labeling it, seeing how it works together, and then being able to communicate it. And then the 4, which is the quadrivium, is made up of mathematics, geometry, music, and astronomy. And if you think about those things, they're kind of in order as well, right? You need to understand numbers first to be able to use them in geometry, astronomy, or music.
Well, from what I understand, there's a story on numbers as well, right?
In terms of like their occult symbology and
right.
what they represent, yeah, there's a much deeper understanding. And to understand that, do we have the trivium book in here, or the quadrivium book?
It's outside.
Oh well, yeah. There's a book called Quadrivium that you can find online on Amazon that you can order. There's also a book on the trivium, I believe, from is it Dorothy Sayers or Sister Miriam Joseph, I believe.
There's quite a few actually.
Yeah, there's several which explain it in detail. Some of them take kind of a Christian theological perspective, but there's many non-religious interpretations and working with the trivium. And it really goes back to Plato and Socrates and these guys. Coming up with these, at least being the first to write down this system of ordered logical thinking. And there's people who trace it back to the Indian Brahmin class, or the great Chinese thinkers like Confucius. But where it originates from, we're not sure. You know what I mean? It's just that it's worked so effectively for so long for people that it's been passed on down the generations. Now the thing about the Trivium and Quadrivium is, as tools, they can be used for good or for bad, for evil essentially. And so when they're all available openly to everyone to use for their own benefit, for rational self-interest, then that would be considered their good use, when it's not for deception or dishonorable purposes. However, when those tools are suppressed or kept away from one group so that the group using them can profit from their use over other people, that's the definition of evil. So in understanding just how education dumbs us down and disequips us from being able to understand any facet of reality, the Trivium and Quadrivium acts like a virus scanner for your mind. You might be watching the news, or reading a book, or reading a biography, or reading a magazine, or watching a documentary, and you're taking in all this information via your five senses, mostly sight and sound. And if you don't have a virus scanner to protect your mind from the potential viral data that's infectious, that's fallacious, that doesn't jive with actual logical reality, you might take those ideas in as fact. And then you might integrate them into your idea set of what you believe reality to be, and you might share those now misinformed facts with other people, which is called asceticism, where you're parroting a belief that you haven't actually verified to someone else as if it's truth. And the danger of that, of course, is then that mistruths and false ideas can then get passed on as truth, on and on and on to people. And this is the nature of Rob talking about, we have all this information, but how much of it is actual knowledge, verifiable, useful knowledge? And so,
well, I was going to say a prime example of that is the email age, where people get these emails all the time of a picture of some ridiculous picture that's clearly not real, and it's got some big story, and then all it's forwarded, and all the remarks are, oh, it made me cry, I can't believe blah blah blah, and you're like, you can find really easily and quickly if it's BS or not. So I don't know how many of those things I've stopped. I'm like, okay, here's the Snopes or Snoops or whatever they are, whoever the ways you can verify. There's other ways to do it, but it's just kind of funny.
And that's the thing, right? Since time is the most valuable currency that we have here, we want as much learning as we want to do. We want to spend our time not having to relearn over and over from the same mistakes.
So proper note-taking is crucial.
Well, note-taking, but efficiently integrating the new data, effectively learning, so that you don't repeat the same mistakes over and over. That's what common sense is supposed to be the embodiment of the common sense. Like, here's the common experiences that we've all had, put into a package and delivered to you individually, so that you have a set of common sense. Like, that is, don't go swimming after you've just eaten. You need oxygen to breathe. Don't put a plastic bag on your head. And it's, this list of, probably by the time you're 20, like thousands of things that you probably take for granted that have been integrated into your habit set, so that you will have a slightly better chance of surviving, right? Don't drink poison. But these are all things that we actually have to learn, right? And things that you don't necessarily want to learn from making the mistake, because it can often be fatal.
Like, I got a chop saw, and when you get a chop saw, there's a thing on there, and it's got a hand and the saw and a big thing with the line through it telling you not to put your hand in the saw. Yeah. And I was like, thank God. Because clearly I was about to stick my hand in there.
Yeah. Or on a hot coffee cup, thankfully it says, don't spill this crap on your face, it's hot. You know what I mean? Just letting you know, because there's people who've gone, oh my God, that's so hot, I'm suing you for millions of dollars. Because they ordered hot coffee and didn't know that it was going to be so hot that it wouldn't burn their face. But that's the kind of world we live in, where it's like, it's more profitable to be ignorant, but it's more profitable to your life, to your safety, to your certainty, to be in the know. And the only way to effectively be in the know is to be able to deduce reality effectively. And that's what the Trivium and Quadrivium allow you to do. So, if you haven't heard of them, you haven't learned about them, even if it sounds boring, it's taken me about 1.5 years to really integrate it into my life. To really, it took several months to really get past the, well, isn't it common sense? You know, like I already kind of knew this stuff, to really get the significance. And one of those things was learning that this is the secret of the secret societies, the 7 liberal arts.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, that's like it's made me realize the, you know, the pyramid and the eye, right? Because the pyramid is the triangle, and then the square base, so it's the trivium and quadrivium, and then the eye on top is that they can see it.
They can, yeah, exactly. And the gap between the you know, the base and the eye is the gap of knowledge, the gap of, you don't have the trivium and quadrivium, and they can see it for what it is, and they see that they've put it everywhere. It's hidden in front of us. We just don't know the significance.
We think it's evil.
Yeah, if anything, we think it's evil.
They've made us believe that it's evil somehow, and that anything occulted is evil. And it's like, no, they occulted it for a reason, so that we wouldn't look at it. And they made it evil so that we would purposely go, oh no, we can't look there. Going to hell if I look there.
Mm-hmm.
So fear amputates the curiosity, as Richard Grove could say it, right?
Yep.
Amputating curiosity, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and occulting just means hiding. You know, to occult something means to hide it. So this is just hidden. But they used, instead of the word hidden, which implies mystery, they use the word occult, which people think of cults. Mm-hmm. So it's cults, so it's mysterious, but not the kind of mystery you want to investigate. It's one of those dangerous mysteries.
There's a similarity, yeah, between cult and cultural too.
Right? Yeah, well, when your cult gets enough people, it becomes a culture.
Right.
That's I think that's from Brett Venant. So, you know, really, if you understand now what we're saying, in education, the 7 liberal arts have been taken out, and the people who were in the position to take out the 7 liberal arts from our proper education come from these secret societies. You can trace it back. You know, Charlotte Iserbyt's father was in Skull and Bones. There, you know, that's just the tiny tip of the iceberg. If you look into these different families, and what do they have to benefit from dumbing down our population? Well, really, it's easier to control our minds, and when we're in positions of fear because our minds are being controlled, we'll go out and give our energy over to them. We'll go out and buy more crap.
We won't properly negotiate for ourselves, and that's what it boils down to. It's having an ability to negotiate for yourself. And if you don't have these tools in your arsenal of negotiation, then you don't have a standing chance against somebody who does, right?
Well, or your intellect will give way to your emotions, and you'll create conflict instead.
Exactly.
If we don't have the intellectual capacity or capability of dealing with the situation thoughtfully and responsibly, then we react and go into emotions, often which turn violent, and that gets us into even more trouble. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for the peaceful, conscious, and non-violent communicative approach to solving our problems. And so education doesn't just mean public education, although we talked about that today. It also means to learn. So we have to yearn to learn. And it's your turn to learn.
And I would like to say that, you know, it's also, we're not negating, I don't know if there's a difference between feelings and emotions, but to me, like, to be able to truly discern something is you take in the information and then you match it with the feeling, not in a reactive kind of way or a...
It's your gut.
Yeah, there's that gut thing.
It's intuition.
Yeah, there's the feeling that you get that's that voice, right? So where it rings true. So we're not saying that you want to negate that, because you actually need that part.
Absolutely.
So that's a key. It's actually
the balance between the two.
Right, and so it's the bridge between the head and that feeling you get in your heart, whatever that is. And I don't know who said it, but the longest journey man ever took was the journey between his head and his heart. So once we can align those two things, then it starts to work for us.
Let the conscience be your guide, so to speak.
Yeah. Or another way you could look at it is what you know and what you understand, and where they meet is where you communicate out to the world.
Whoa.
Wow.
I just made that shit up.
High five on that one.
Or I creatively stole it from someone else.
Remedy Radio out.
So thank you so much for joining us for this third episode of Remedy Radio.
Been a lot of fun.
We're hoping that you'll check out some of our friends, tragedyandhope.com, peacerevolution.org, gnosticmedia.com, Brett Venant's School Sucks podcast. If you liked what you heard today, he's got hours of content and brilliant interviews with many people about the education system, talking about how it's really run like the mafia. Maria.net, CorbettReport.com, MediaMonarchy.com, Pharmacy.com. What else is there? You know, we're trying to bring you as much
Who are we interviewing up next?
Interview. Okay, who do we got coming up? Well, we're gonna be getting interviews with James Evan Pilato of Media Monarchy.
Very cool.
We're going to be lining something up with Brett Venot and a few other surprises up over the next couple of weeks. And so stay tuned for future episodes of Remedy Radio, and we'll be coming at you soon with episode number 5.
And before you go, if you feel that what we say today is of any value, just forward it to somebody who might think along the same lines as you, because I know that if I go down to the repertoire of friends that I have and I get an email and I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool stuff, I usually go, okay, there's like 4 or 5 of my friends that would appreciate this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, make sure you make the conscious effort to pass the information on if you feel that it's worth passing on. So,
and support.
Yeah.
Support us financially and all the other people we mentioned, because most people are actually doing this out of their own pocket.
Yeah, on a shoestring budget.
We are. Well, it's the importance of getting the information out above all else. And none of us take any corporate advertising. None of us really take any advertising at all.
We all have a need to live in a non-violent future.
Yeah, and we all are trying to grow our own food and everything. So, you know, your support, whether it's spiritual, emotional, physical, or financial, is greatly appreciated.
Very much so.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Peace, guys.
Peace.